Hi, it's Gene retired in Mexico, and I'm glad to have my special guest here, Professor Gumbo. Welcome to the countdown of that. We're in the 80s now, so we're excited about that. And so this is long after we were, pretty much long after we were through with high school and college. So this is an era that we both continued listening to music. We didn't stop, and I still haven't stopped. And say it's going to be great. And I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Patreon. All the links are available here if you look. Hit that notification bell, all that. Subscribe. We really appreciate any engagement. And so I've not had a chance to check in with the professor. We've not talked off camera. So how you doing?
I'm doing okay. Um, People who have been watching this might notice that for the 70s, I had a 1970s background, and my background for the 1980s is just going to be blurred because the the 80s was a blur to me.
That's a good comeback. Okay, we'll
This
buy
is
that.
this is how I remember it.
What we're doing here is we're counting down our top 10 albums of the year 1980. And then we take turns going first. It'll be the professor's turn to go first. And then we'll have five honorable mentions. And yes, I got mine down to five. It was painful. I had a couple that I just had to cut at the last minute, but I was like, no, I'm going to be like the professor. I'm going to do five. So I've got my 15 albums. What do you think about 80? What was your take on that?
Well, let me just say that taking the albums I definitely wanted to put in there, I got 25. And so I had to whittle off 10. And it hurt. Every one of those hurt, like pulling a piece of myself out. I I'm only comforting myself in that I still listen to those albums. This is just for this, but I had 25 and I had to get rid of 10 of them.
Yeah, I had 12 albums that were four and a half or five stars, and it was extremely painful. And I made changes today. I had one that was way up and it dropped all the way down to honorable mentions. I was just like, this is really a brutal year. But it's not so much for me because of the number of albums, but just that there was that 12 or 13 that were just primo. And just getting it down to 10 hurt. Okay, I'm going to give a quick synopsis of 80. I'm going to try to run through this quickly. But there were some events just to give context to the year. Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. It was actually Christmas Day 1979, so it was a week before 1980, but 1980 was when we heard about it and it was in the news. So of course, Afghanistan still in the news today. Lech Walesa leads strikes in Poland. Do you remember that name, Lech Walesa?
Yeah. Yeah, Peter Gabriel's Wallflower is about him.
Oh, okay. That's right. I forgot about that. And yeah, he was. So, see, there's a music tie-in. Thank you for that. Ronald Reagan defeated Jimmy Carter in the U.S. presidential election. Did that have any repercussions? I would say so.
Well, yeah, the Clash wrote Ivan Meets G.I. Joe.
The In sports, the USA defeated the USSR in Olympic hockey. Now, they went on to win the gold. So the United States winning gold in hockey was called the Miracle on Ice. It was never expected to happen. And then the Summer Olympics, the U.S. boycotted the Summer Olympics, and we didn't send any athletes to Soviet Union because that was in Moscow. So it's quite a year for the Olympics. Mount St. Helens erupted. Yeah, big story. Biggest U.S. eruption. I don't think there's been one since then that was that vicious. The word yuppie was coined. Yeah, 1980. Pac-Man video game was released. You'd think it was older than 1980, but it was not. Everyone was asking who shot JR. I didn't tune in to find out. CNN launched. So that was the first year of CNN. And then in deaths, it was a pretty big year. So John Lennon was murdered in December. of 1980. So we still talk about that. And other deaths included Bon Scott of AC/DC. Ian Curtis hung himself. He's from Joy Division. John Bonham of Led Zeppelin, he died. The jazz pianist Bill Evans, Peter Sellers, Steve McQueen, John Paul Sartre, and Alfred Hitchcock. So there's some big names that year. And the top movies included The Empire Strikes Back, Private Benjamin, 9 to 5, Airplane, Coal Miner's Daughter, and The Blues Brothers. All right. I'm ready for you to begin.
Okay, so my number 10 is The Clash, Sandinista.
Mm.
And this was a really interesting album, an album that was at first bewildering and difficult to get into, exactly the same way that in 1968 the Beatles' White Album was bewildering and kind of difficult to get into. The Clash was a punk band, and even the London Calling, even though it had a variety of types of music, it still had that punk ethos all the way. But the Clash had been getting more political, obviously from the name of the album, and they'd also started really investigating. They, especially Mick Jones, he had become enamored of early New York hip hop, specifically bands like the Grandmaster Flash and the
Mm.
Furious Five. And as a matter of fact, in one of the shows they did in New York, I think it was Grandmaster Flash opened for them, and people were um, complaining. They were yelling out, they were heckling, and Jones went to the microphone and told them to shut the F up, that, this was the music that was influencing them right now. So uh, they hadn't lost their interest in reggae or uh, dub, but they still had, but they were really using a lot of hip hop sounds in there, and a lot. It's not a London album. It is, if anything, it is the Clash's New York album. Okay,
Mm.
and it was three discs, three records on CD. You could get it on two discs now, but it's just it was people called it cluttered, but to me, it's what they were doing at the time, and they just wanted to get everything out there. And the other interesting thing is that the cost of it was at a reduced price. It didn't cost much more than a single record, and they took the hit on that because they wanted to get this out there. So a lot of the tracks on there are not indispensable as individual tracks, but the whole thing, taken as a whole, it's indispensable as an album, a very long album, but a very fulfilling album. So my choices, I start with definitely the rap, and that's the Magnificent Seven, and
Mm.
that's very much inspired by uh, Grandmaster Flash, um, and it has lots of funny noises, and Mick Jones, when he sings vacuum cleaner sucks up budgie, and you hear Joe Strummer go um, and then a song that is more a single and more of a typical Clash song, and very much a political song, Washington Bullets, very contemporary about what's going on, about America and England, but America really getting overly involved in uh, world politics. And so, that song, I just really would find it to be still relevant today. So the Magnificent Seven and Washington Bullets.
Yeah, great choices. I do love that album. Uh, yeah, it takes time, takes patience. So for those viewers wondering what the two songs is about, we're each picking two songs from our top 10, and then we will make a Spotify playlist. Put the link below. Really good playlists. I encourage you to listen to them. All right, my number 10. I moved this out of my honorable mentions today, and I moved it into the number 10 slot because I just couldn't not put it there. And I might be a little biased because I own the DVD, but we're talking about Joni Mitchell's Shadows and Light. This is one of the finest live albums, and the band, oh Lord, the band. Jacob Storius on bass, Don Elias on drums and percussion, Pat Metheny on guitar, Michael Brecker on sax, Lyle Mays on keyboards, and Joni Mitchell on rhythm guitar. And this band is so hot. And you're talking about jazz, folk rock. It's mostly from Court and Spark on, and she really primarily mines kind of that period of Hissing in Summer Lawns, Fajira, and Don Juan's Reckless Daughter. But I actually prefer, well, also Mingus. So Mingus is an album with a lot of chatter in it. It's got little vignettes or segues with Charles Mingus talking. She picked three songs from Mingus, put them on here. And I think I prefer these live versions over the ones on Mingus. I love the album. Mingus didn't pick it. I think that was a 79 album. Just in terms of playing, as fine a set of musicians as you'll ever hear. And my picks, it was tough, but I'm going to go with one of those Mingus tracks that I talked about, the Dry Cleaner in Des Moines. At first, I was going to pick Goodbye Pork Pie Hat because her lyrics are so brilliant on Goodbye Pork Pie Hat. I think there are even better lyrics, but the band just lets loose on Dry Cleaner in Des Moines, and it's just a great showcase for the band. And then the other musical act on here is the Persuasions, which is a all vocal group, and I think they opened on the tour. And then she called them up on stage to do a couple numbers, and her rendition of the a cappella Shadows and Light, the title track, which was all Joni's layered voices on Hissing the Summer Lawns. Here she performs it with the Persuasions, and it's really nice and it's really moving. So Joni Mitchell, Shadows and Light at number 10.
Great, great album. All right, my number 9 is another album by a British group, a post-punk British group that has certain political ramifications to it. But here the fingers are being pointed just as much at England as America. That is XTC's Black Sea. And XTC had begun to take a almost industrial kind of sound to their production, but it's a dark album, and it's still melodic, but it's dark, and you've got it doesn't have the brightness of their previous work. Generals and Majors is the uh, Colin Colin Moulding song. Colin Moulding was one of the two songwriters for XTC. He he basically, for every song he wrote, Andy Partridge wrote 10. And
Yeah.
so it was kind of uneven, but the Colin Moulding songs were great. And Generals and Majors is his political statement. And it has despite the darkness of the album, it has kind of a bouncy, uh, different feel to it. It doesn't get as dark until later. But Generals and Majors, so that's Colin Moulding's, and then Andy Partridge has one of his strongest songs of the up until then, "Towers of London,"
Mm.
and I just love at the end when he sings Londinium," which was the Roman name for London. So XTC, Black Sea, Generals and Majors, and Towers of London.
That is such a great album. And yeah, it starts with that staticky record playing, and it's in that compressed like a radio. And then in comes those drums, Lily White's drums. And I was going to talk, I wanted to mention producers on here too, because this is an interesting year because I have some albums that have the same producer. I forgot to mention Shadows and Light because the producer on that album is Joni Mitchell. And she usually worked with an outside producer, but she did that album herself. But the next one, you're going to be very pleased, Jim, because it's someone that's been making your lists and hasn't made my lists yet. But I like this period of Rush. So I have Permanent Waves on here at number 9. I like this 80-81 commercial period with the synthesizers and everything. Yeah, that was their biggest radio era, but that's the Rush that I like the best. I like a lot of Rush. Uh, but yeah, this is just a brilliant album. The producer on here is Terry Brown, and he pretty much was just Rush's producer. And he didn't work with many other bands, and he worked with them on many albums. And what a great sound on here. And the band is just in such fine form. They're all playing so tightly as an ensemble. But the lyrics, and I guess Neil Peart got a little help on one or two of the songs. And I can't remember the guy's name. I didn't look it up before we logged on. Do you remember?
No, I don't. I don't. I do remember that he had a collaborator, but I don't remember the name of the collaborator.
And they worked on Free Will, which is one of my songs. And it's just such a great lyric. If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. And I love this heavy rock with these really high IQ lyrics. I like this combination of Neil Peart writing lyrics for the whole band. And I know Peart gets all the praise as one, a lot of people think he's the best drummer ever. But when you listen to Lifeson and Lee on the guitar and bass, man, these guys are locked in. Um, I don't need to say a lot because I think people are familiar with this album, but the other track is the opening track, The Spirit of Radio, a nice little criticism of the radio industry. And again, smart lyrics, smart playing, and tons of melody on here. And then you get that an instrumental like XYZ, which is really good too. But I'm going to go with Spirit of Radio and Free Will. Rush, Permanent Waves. I hope you're pleased.
I'm so glad that you chose that because they were one of the albums that of my 25 that was moved off. So I'm glad that you got it in there. Okay, next. My the woman who became my favorite female singer, what Joni Mitchell is for you, Kate Bush. And this is her third album, Never Forever. And it's the first studio album she made after she actually did some live touring in the UK, some live shows, I should say, in the UK. And her, it's a foretaste of what is to come. Her production is getting more clever. Her songs are becoming more complex. And the concept, the lyrical concept of her songs is pretty amazing for songs that are fit in the typical single 4 minutes or so range. The two examples I gave of that I'm giving of this are Babushka, which is about a woman who is jealous of her husband, thinks that he doesn't love her anymore. And so she decides to fool him by dressing up as another woman. And she dresses really fancy and she surprises him. And he apparently does not recognize her. And he falls for her. And she's, like, yeah, see, you're cheating on me. And when he finds out, No, it was you just reminded me of the beautiful, vibrant woman that was my wife in the early days. And so it wasn't a case of cheating, it was a case of falling in love again with the same person because she had become the earlier person that he had fallen in love with, which is a very clever concept. And and had a great video with it too. During the verses, she's wearing a black veil and a black leotard. Um, then when it goes into the babushka, she's wearing a Viking bikini is the only way I can, say it. And Kate Bush could get away with that. She never was too, at least during her main career, she was not averse to utilizing her sexuality to add to her music. And then the next one, Breathing, it's the last song on the album, and it is told from the point of view of a fetus. And it's a fetus, and it's not a song about abortion. It's a song about um, a a fetus breathing in the poisons, both personal, the mother smoking, and general, the radiation and things that were going on in the world. And at the end, like there's a nuclear explosion, and this fetus is getting inundated with all of the radiation from that. But it's a very, very powerful song. So Never Forever by Kate Bush. Oh, speaking of her using her sexuality, the cover of it was banned in some countries because it's a painting of her with her dress coming up and all these creatures are flying out from underneath her dress. And I think the Japanese found that too offensive, so they had to get a different cover.
Too many
So,
bats in the belfry, huh?
yeah, yeah. Because she's saying, this is where my ideas come from, my womb.
Wow.
Um, so Kate Bush, Never Forever, Babushka, and Breathing.
Those are, I think, my two favorite songs from there, and both great songs. Breathing is, I don't think there's any song like it. It's so unique and so emotional. Yeah, I love it. Great essay. Thank you. My number eight, talking about producers, a producer named Nigel Gray produced I had to get my favorite album by The Police in here. Most people would probably pick Synchronicity or Ghost in the Machine, but I think this is the most solid album. Um, and there's only one track written by another member of the band, which is I think Behind My Camel was a Stuart Copeland composition. The more songs written by Sting, the better.
True.
It's what holds Synchronicity back is you have songs like Miss Gradenko and some pretty embarrassing compositions by Summers and Copeland. Say what you will about Sting, he was the songwriter, he was the man, and yeah, I love the playing on here. I heard somebody, I was watching a thing the other day, and they were saying Sting wasn't the best bass player. And I kind of don't understand that because people praise Copeland as one of the best drummers. Well, isn't that a rhythm section, drums and bass?
Yeah.
I think Sting really allows Copeland to shine. And then you just have these really tasty fills by Summers. Summers just doesn't play. He just won't play standard electric lead guitar. He just refuses. Everything's about color and chords. And it's infectious. I think the bass is great on here and the recording is great. Yeah, Zenyatta Mandata, just such a great. I remember I had the album at a record signing in 1980, and I was in line to have those three guys sign my copy. And the line was so long that I just blew it off. I kind of wish I'd stood in line. It'd be a nice collectible today. But at least I got to see him sitting there at the table signing. And oh, what do you pick for songs? I mean, you have these great singles from here, but I am going to, I mean, the singles are great. They are Don't Stand So Close to Me and Da Do 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 Da 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 Da. But I'm going to go with Driven to Tears, a song about their travels to India. Too many cameras and not enough food. Just a really great song. And then just because of the playing and the tempo, I like When the World is Running Down, You Make the Best of What's Still Around. So my favorite Police album, Zenyatta Mandata.
There's another one that not only was this in my top 25, it was in my top 16. It was my final one to cut before I, cut down. So, but
Yeah,
yes, it's a fine album.
yeah.
Okay, my number seven is my personal favorite, Van Morrison, and his album Common One. And this was an album that took me a little while to really warm up to for Van. Um, it it had kind of a low key feel to it. There's not any real rockers in there, but instead it's some, you know, soulful, spiritual, bluesy type of stuff. However, the first song that I would choose from it does have a fast drum tempo, and Van is singing along with it, and it's where Van name checks all of his literary references, and that is "Summertime in England" and Wordsworth and Cambridge and Wordsworth and Coleridge, baby. They were rocking down in Kendall. T.S. Eliot chose England. T.S. Eliot chose England. And it's like Van is showing off how well read he is with this one. Uh, and he would continue to do this song in concert for quite a while. And actually, I have a personal favorite, which is from 10 years later from the Live in Montreux in 1990. There's several Live in Montreux he did, but the Live in Montreux 1990, which is my absolute favorite bootleg of all time, and next to It's Too Late to Stop Now, my favorite Van Morrison live. But this version is really cool, and you've got uh, Pee Wee Ellis on saxophone, Mark Isham on uh, trumpet.
Trumpet.
Um, what's that? Yeah,
Yeah, trumpet.
and yeah, and it's got some interesting horns in it. And Van wrote the horn charts himself, and he, being a saxophonist, he likes to do that, and he was really good at it. It just takes if you love Van Morrison, you will like this album. If you don't love Van Morrison, you may want to start elsewhere. The other song, I had to choose between two songs starting with S, Satisfied and Spirit. And Satisfied is a very funky song, you know. It's probably the funkiest song on the album, and I really love it. But Spirit is
Hmm.
just, where he says, he's talking about his spirit. He says, I said, help me, angel. And then he sings, oh no, spirit don't ever die. And it's a very powerful spiritual, no pun intended. So Summertime in England and Spirit from Van Morrison's Common One.
Great, great choices. You know, I love that album from the Van Morrison discography that we did, and
Yes. Yes, you
yeah,
rated it
that's like
higher
a
than I did.
yeah, it's like a top five or six for me. Um, my number seven, well, only probably the only album on my list that will mildly surprise. You know, I like this band. I really like three or four of their albums a lot, and their band, when we get to the people we've seen live in concert, I'll talk about them, but I'm going to go with the debut by the Psychedelic Furs, the US vinyl version. There were different releases of this. And here we are, Steve Lillywhite again, uh, produced quite a bit of this album, but not all of it. It had multiple producers. Martin Hannett, who works with Joy Division. He was on
Yes.
here. And then there were some other producers plus the band. So maybe on paper it shouldn't have worked, but I don't know what it is about this album, but I love the attitude and Richard Butler's smoky vocals, and it's got a really dark feel to it, which is really interesting. And the use of the saxophone, it's not typical use of the saxophone. And I don't know, I just love the sound of this album. I think the producers really helped. And yeah, it's their debut. I love it. I'm going to go with the songs Sister Europe and Imitation of Christ. But
Hmm.
there are several good songs on this album.
I agree. It's a great album. Cindy would agree even more. When I first got the album, Cindy was listening to it over and over again. Um, and Richard Butler's voice, you mentioned it being smoky, and it is. It's kind of like if John Lydon, Johnny Rotten, were to try to sing like David Bowie. Um, uh, but it's really an interesting post-punk album and a good one too.
And I was just
Okay,
real quick, I'll just interject real quickly. Two singers that you have strong opinions about that Richard Butler said was his two biggest influences, David Bowie and Jim Morrison.
really,
So
really,
how's that for a contrast?
pretty interesting. Yeah,
The
yeah.
baritones, both
Yes,
baritones.
that's right. I think who was it? Who uh, is it? Billy Idol also loved Bowie's deep, throaty vocals. Okay, my number six. This was a groundbreaking album because it was a band breaking album. Not really, but it was the end of the Who as a world class band when Keith Moon died. And they continued to make a couple albums after that. But those albums would have been just as good had they been Pete Townsend albums and not called themselves The Who, because neither of the two that came up quickly afterwards, Face Dances and what was the other one?
It's hard.
Yes, it's hard. Face Dances and It's Hard. Neither of those come close to the masterworks that The Who had made earlier. But Pete Townsend, and here he was dealing with his alcoholism. He hadn't completely come to terms with it. He hadn't quit drinking, but he realized that he had a problem. And so the album is called Empty Glass. And there's a couple songs on there where he sings about, you know, that he needs to do something about his drinking. And I mentioned when we were talking about Who Are You, how that was based on a real thing where Townsend was drinking with some of the young punks of the era in a bar, and he just wanted to show how contemptuous he was of the music business. So he took a big check that he'd just gotten and tore it up. And then he went out and fell down in the street, and and a cop had to wake him up.
He
Um,
showed him. He showed him.
yeah, he certainly did. But he probably bottomed out at that point. That was probably his bottoming out. Rough Boys is about those boys, and he's about those young punks. And, and Townsend, although he apparently ever seems to be cisgendered, he doesn't mind bringing his feminine self in, as to the songs, which he says to the boys, "I want to bite and kiss you." Um, so Rough Boys is a real rocker. It's a Who level rocker by Townsend, and the next one is uses some synthesizers, but there's nothing unusual about that because Townsend had been using synthesizers since Who's Next. But Let My Love Open the Door. And it's a beautiful, beautiful song. I want to mention, as far as his getting in touch with his feminine side, And I Moved was another one. But the two songs that I chose, Rough Boys and Let My Love Open the Door from Pete Townshend's Empty Glass.
Yeah, great album. Yeah, good review. Yeah, okay. I'm going to move on to my number six, which was produced by Jim Morrison. Wait, wrong door. Produced by Ray Manzarek. This is X, Los Angeles, their debut album. Wow. It's funny. There's just, I mean, I think this is the same year that Black Flag released Damaged.
Mm-hmm.
So most people would have that album in their top 10. Highly revered album. I love that album. It doesn't quite do it for me like Los Angeles does. There's just something about X, about John Doe and Exene, and DJ Bonebreak on drums, and then those just sweet two-bar solos by Billy Zoom, who is able to just tease you with just a taste of Chuck Berry and then move on. I think and the production's great. Manzarek stays out of the way mostly. He does, they do a cover of Soul Kitchen, and then he plays organ, I think on The World's a Mess, It's in My Kiss. I think he plays organ on that. But for the most part, Manzarek stays out of the way and just lets this band play. And what's the connection? Los Angeles. Because the Doors were an LA band. He liked X, and he was hip enough to what they were doing, but it's a strange marriage. You wouldn't expect the Doors and the hardcore movement of California to cross paths, but they did, and it worked. And I love Los Angeles, and I love the band X. My songs, really kind of hard to choose, but I'm going to go with, and for those of you who haven't heard this album, it's just so melodic and rocking and so tight and economical. I'm going to go, even though it is a brutal song lyrically, Johnny Hit and Run Pauline, which is basically about drug rape. It's just it's a horrible song lyrically, but it's great musically, and X never shied away from any subject. And then the title track, Los Angeles. So I'm a big fan of X's debut, Los Angeles.
Great description of the album, and I concur with you that it's a fantastic one. Okay, my number 5. It was tough to choose 2 songs from here because there's so many good songs, but a lot of the songs are simply good. It was a release for Bruce Springsteen. His albums up till then were very, very tightly controlled. Everything was chosen very carefully, and he would save his live his live performances to just spread out and do rockers. Well, The River, he made, I think it was through the influence of Miami Steve Van Zandt, Springsteen agreed to spread out. And so of the songs on there, you've got about a half dozen or more striking ballads or semi-ballads. And then you have a lot of rockers. And the rockers typically on this album are throwaways. When I say throwaways, I mean, if you're putting together a best of Bruce Springsteen, you may not choose them. They're great songs, but they're like concert live, yeah, yeah, yeah type of things. So I avoided those. And then I was very tempted to choose the single, Hungry Heart, which we had a friend who, his wife, she hated Bruce Springsteen's voice, but she really loved Hungry Heart. She thought it was Jackson Brown. Okay. But I'm not choosing it because it does sound too much like Jackson Brown. I chose 2 of the ballads, but both of them are very powerful ballads. One of them is The River. just the river itself. And it's a heart-wrenching song about a guy who gets his girlfriend pregnant and their lives never go anywhere. But at night, they go down to the river and becomes a metaphor for, somehow not sex, but, just relationship.
Mhm.
Um, but then the other one is a song that's almost scary, and that is Point Blank. Um, Point blank, you've been shot in the head. Point blank, bang, bang, baby, you're dead. And just the musical background to it, the keyboards from Roy Batan and Danny Federici, the organ and pianos together really make that song. So the river and Point Blank from the river.
Choices. Yeah. Yeah, I love the ballads on that album. I like Independence Day a lot.
Yes, that's another one about leaving his father,
Right.
leaving his
Yeah.
family.
I'm with you. I think the rockers are great, but my favorite songs on there are the ballads. So I'm with you 100% on that. All right, we haven't had any crossover yet. We do now. Number five, produced by a very well-known producer, Chris Thomas, who worked with Elton John and a bunch of people. This is Empty Glass. I agree with you completely. Pete Townsend was one of my three favorite albums that year when it came out in 1980, and it has remained so. So for 45 years, I have never tired of this album. It just keeps speaking to me, and I love it. It sounds great. You mentioned synthesizers. He balances many different instruments on here, harmonica and different kind of things that just all balance out really nicely. Some great guitar playing. And yeah, he obviously saved his best songs for his solo material, and smartly so. But I think is this my favorite Pete Townsend? Probably. There are songs on his next album that are favorites of mine, but as a whole, from track to track to track, this might be his magnum opus. But he made about at least three really good solo albums, and I like them all. But this one might be my favorite. I don't know. When we get around to those years and I listen to those, I'll decide. I just watched an interview with Pete Townsend. They asked him to name his five favorite songs that he ever wrote.
Was that on the late night talk show, right?
Yeah, he
Uh,
mentioned Behind Blue Eyes. He mentioned Baba O'Reilly. He mentioned Won't Get Fooled Again.
Ree from Who's Next.
Yeah, he mentioned, I don't know, maybe Who Are You? But then he said, Let My Love Open the Door. So who am I to argue with Pete Townsend? I think it was a pretty objective list. And yeah, it's the single. It's the one that got all the radio play. Maybe I've heard it a bunch of times, but it's objectively a great song. And then my other pick is the title track, Empty Glass. Love the guitar, love the lyrics. Life is useless like Ecclesiastes. I think that's that song. And I absolutely love the lyrics on Empty Glass. Really speaks to me, but many good many good songs on there. I was just listening to it again the other day, Jules and Jim. Nobody gives a shit that Keith Moon is dead. You know,
Right.
there's
There
just
were
so many
angry
great,
songs.
and you mentioned and I moved, and he laid me down like an empty dress. I mean, really extraordinary lyrics. I mean, I'm just a sucker for that. I'm just a sucker for good rock and roll set to really intelligent lyrics. So Empty Glass at number five.
My number four, God, these next four are just amazing. They are like 5 star, no, 6 stars out of five. Okay. Uh,
Yeah.
and and this one is Talking Heads Remain in Light. This is my this is my favorite Talking Heads album. Okay, it being their fourth album. It was their fourth album, right? Yeah, their fourth album. And I didn't think that uh, their that they could be beat with the third album,
Hear music.
Fear of Music, but they did here. And I think what caused this album to be so fantastic was David Byrne, who's going to be in Phoenix next in the spring, by the way,
Oh, really?
performing it. Yeah, yeah. But David Byrne, uh, he collaborated with Brian Eno on found vocals and setting them to music, and mostly it was like third world rhythms and all, but it was a really, really interesting album. And that was My Life in the Bush of Ghosts. Well, I I think that they were thinking, okay, David, why don't you sing like these found vocals? And we'll use this kind of music. And they brought in a bunch of ringers, a lot of great musicians as guest stars on the album, which was ultimately to lead to the Stop Making Sense tour. But it was hard to choose because the songs are so good, and they all have videos of David Byrne being totally spastic, and like, take a look at these hands, take a look at these hands. Um, so, but I was able to choose my two favorites from it. The first one is Born Under Punches. The Heat Goes On. Born Under Punches. I'm a tumbler. I'm a government man. And then one of their most famous uh, songs, and largely because of the video, is Once in a Lifetime. And but that's it's a great song. So um, from Talking Heads, Remain in Light, Born Under Punches, and really, I wanted to add that Brian Eno had so much influence on this album that he basically became the fifth member of the band, which I don't think Jerry Harrison minded, but Tina and Chris got a little bit annoyed with how David was always hanging around with Eno, and they felt that, you know, that it was kind of interfering with the vibe of the band.
When they sing and the heat goes on, I can really hear Brian Eno's voice
Oh
on
yes,
that chorus. So he definitely inserted himself as a vocalist. Yeah, great essay there. What was I going to say about that? Nothing. I think you said it all. Well, my number four album is produced by the same person as my number five album. That's why I wanted to talk about producers. It's Chris Thomas again, with the exception of one song. And that's the debut by, I have a lot of debuts on here. The debut by Pretenders. And I'm a huge Pretenders fan. Now, Nick Lowe produced Stop Your Sobbing. It was a Kinks cover. And according to Wikipedia, he said, well, this band isn't going anywhere. So he left, and Chris Thomas stepped in. I know what I was going to say. I'm going to back up. Here's what I was going to say about Remain in Light. For those viewers who just might possibly make a comment, My Life in the Bush of Ghosts was released in 1981 after Remain in Light. However, the release of that album was delayed. And I think the professor is exactly correct. I believe that album was actually recorded first.
was.
So, yeah, lest anyone say, hey, wait, that album came later. Well, in terms of release date, yes, but not in terms of recording date. Anyway, back to Pretenders. God, I love this album. Such attitude. Chrissie Hynde is so great. Her unique vibrato that she's got. It's just so great. And her her attitude. It's it's all over here, right? I'm so, the famous example is, you're so precious, but not me, baby. So just fuck off. And she's
Great.
got such attitude on here. And for this Ohio woman to move to England and hook up with these three Brits. And I think it's hard for people to understand. I remember the first female band I ever heard of, not counting Motown, like Shangri-La's or somebody, was Fanny. Remember Fanny? And
Mhm.
then you had Susie Quattro. And this was good music, but it was lame compared to Pretenders. Man, they came out of the gate with a much harder edge. And we certainly had singers like Janis Joplin that belted it out, but I don't know if there was ever I don't know if there's a president for this band, really. I can't think of, there's got to be somebody, but I can't really think of anybody who just came and rocked so hard. Um, a woman singer like this. It shouldn't have been that special by 79, 80.
Jefferson
This album
Airplane.
had some advanced singles and so can you think of anyone?
Jefferson Airplane.
Yeah, Grace Slick certainly had the attitude, that's for sure. She didn't take no crap from nobody. So yeah, that's a good point. But then in comes the punk aesthetic, and yeah, love the Pretenders debut album. Really, really hard to pick songs from here because it's such a rock solid album. But I will go with one of the singles because it's undeniably great. That's Brass in Pocket. And then the song that they always like to open with, and I saw them open with this song twice, The Weight, a deeper track, but I love The Weight. So The Weight and Brass in Pocket, Pretenders, produced by Chris Thomas, number 4.
Yet another fantastic one that I had to cut. Okay, my number three. It was the third album also by my once favorite singer, and I still love his stuff, although he puts out an album like once every 20 years, and that is Peter Gabriel. Yeah, by the way, he has a follow-up to IO that he's working on. So that means that maybe before we're dead, he'll have released it. Um,
Okay.
but Peter Gabriel, I mentioned before that this was the album that sounded like I had dreamed a Peter Gabriel album without Genesis would sound. And it's interesting that everybody gives credit to Phil Collins for the gated drum sound or blames Phil Collins for the gated drum sound. But the fact is that Phil Collins, he did develop that sound, but he did it on Peter Gabriel's third album. And Peter Gabriel said to him, he said, Phil, we're both drummers. You're a great drummer. I was an okay drummer, but I don't want any cymbals on this album. And so he said, come up with a sound that sounds good without cymbals. And so Phil worked on it. He came up with that gated drum sound, and it of course was uh, helped by Steve Lillywhite and on production, and I believe Hugh Padgham on uh, engineering.
Correct.
Yeah. And so you had that dynamic duo of Steve and Hugh, and it made us an album that sounds unlike anything else. Not even Peter Gabriel's later albums. This is a very distinctive album. He uses the Fairlight synthesizer, but he uses it sparingly. And he adds a lot of tribal music. Peter Gabriel had started the WOMAD, World of Music and
Arts and
Dance
dance.
dance, music, arts, and dance, and uh, and he was really getting into third world stuff at the time, which you realize with the closing track, Biko. Um, but there's just we talked last time about fear of music having kind of a paranoid claustrophobic feel to it. This also has a paranoid claustrophobic feel. And there's a song about what appears to be a political assassination. Um, you know, and it's just Gabriel's lyrics are very dark. I'm choosing the two songs that he chose as singles and made some great videos for. One of them is I don't remember, I
Hmm.
don't recall, I got no memory of anything at all. Or
Great song.
find Ich mich immer. He went on the German version because he recorded the album in German also. Um, I don't remember. And then the other one was the single, which is about uh, uh, war, and it's Games Without Frontiers. And so many people thought that Kate Bush singing in the background was "She's So Funky," yeah, but she's singing James Sans Frontières, James Sans Frontières, Games Without Frontiers. Um, and that was a big single in America. I don't remember, wasn't as big of one in America, but it was still released as a single. And I think in the UK, it was much bigger. So Peter Gabriel's third album was where Peter Gabriel really came into his own and began taking a long time between albums and um, making very distinctive albums. Uh, Gabriel was never super prolific like his former classmates in Genesis. Okay, so Peter Gabriel 3, I Don't Remember, and Games Without Frontiers.
Oh, great picks. I love those two songs. And yeah, I had read that something I didn't know, but Hugh Padgham said when he was working with Phil Collins that he took an idea that he had started with on a Susie and the Banshees album. And it was sort of semi-gated reverb. And then he went full bore on this album, but he gave credit to that album. I never thought of that before, but yeah, great album. My number three will surprise you by its position. You probably would have expected it at best an honorable mention, but the playing. Oh, you talked about how good this band is. Pete Thomas, Bruce Thomas, Steve Naive, and Elvis Costello playing on Get Happy, double exclamation points. Is this Elvis Costello's best album? Well, it's the most nimble, I'll tell you that. I think the playing is ferocious on here. These guys are so good. And Nick Lowe's production is so good on here. You can listen to any one of the instruments. Just listen to the bass. It's fantastic. Just listen to the drums. Just listen to Steve Naive on organ and keyboard. It's so great. In fact, Costello kind of gets lost on guitar a little bit. It's almost a rhythm section album, but you might be surprised I like this album as well as I do. But it's one of my favorite Elvis Costello albums, and it's just, I use that word fun a lot, but man, is this album fun to listen to, and it sounds great in the headphones. Oh, wonderful. How am I going to pick two songs from an album with 20 songs? So
40 if
I
you look
picked,
at the re-release. 40 songs on the re-release.
oh
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
I haven't
on the
listened to that.
Rhino re-release has 40 songs.
So obviously we're lyrics guys. So I can admit that Elvis might have had, this may not be his lyrical peak, but it's still damn good. There's a lot of clever lyrics on here. But to me, the band is as good as I've ever heard them on here. It's so much fun. There's one cover, 19 originals. So here's the two I'm going to go with. And this will surprise you probably. But first one, I just love the bass on it. Five Gears in Reverse. Great
Mhm.
song. And then I'm going to go with a underrated ballad called Motel Matches. Throwing you away like motel matches. But you could throw a dart at a dartboard. These are all great songs. So Elvis Costello and the Attractions, Get Happy, double exclamation point.
That's a great, great album in my honorable mentions. Number two, this is an album that I was obsessed with for a little while. This and its predecessor, I got both of them and I was just constantly listening to them. I was thinking, how did I miss these guys? before the lead singer killed himself. And that was Joy Division, Closer. Um, it's the first album that they did, Unknown Pleasures, is also a great album, but this one has a magic to it, a kind of mystical magic, and it's there's a couple songs, like one of the ones I'm going to choose, that were more rocking, but their songs were more moody, and it's understandable why they were because um, Ian Curtis was going through a suicidal funk at the time. So what he was writing was, it reflected that. And then, of course, simultaneous to this album, they released what became their hugest hit ever, Love Will Tear Us Apart, which just tears my heart apart every time I hear it because um, he was in the middle of the breakup with his wife. He had been having an affair with someone else, but also he worked as a he worked as a counselor in a suicide prevention thing, and this girl who had epilepsy, like he did, he was constantly counseling her to hang in there, no pun intended. Um, so anyway, there's Closer. Joy Division, Closer. The two songs I chose are the first and the last. The first one, except for the fact that its production is cleaner, could have been from Unknown Pleasures, Atrocity Exhibition, which is named after um, uh, a, a book by J.G. Ballard. Okay. J.G. Ballard was one of the new wave of science fiction writers. And Atrocity Exhibition, of course, the title itself, an exhibition of horrible things. This is the way, come inside. And then the next one, the final one, is Decades. The Decades just moves along at a slow, not plodding, but deliberate pace. And when he sings mournfully, where have they gone? Where have they gone? He just gives you chills. So, Joy Division, Closer with Atrocity Exhibition and Decades. Don't listen if you're feeling depressed.
Right. Wow. I didn't know you liked that album as much as you do. It's a great album, and no one would argue with you. Certainly a favorite of the critics and the public. So it's probably number one on Rate Your Music. I don't remember, but it's probably their number one album. That's a fan website. Have you been there?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's it's a little tip towards what's cool. So some bands like U2 and REM don't get a lot of love, but if it's cool, it's on there, man. So my number two, I expect this to be your number one. So I'll just say it. It's David Bowie's Scary Monsters. Um, it was both top five or six album. I think top five for both of us on our Bowie discography, and you can go there. Just type in Bowie under the little magnifying glass, and it would be the third episode because it's when we got to our highest rankings. But yeah, I love Scary Monsters. Yeah, it is a Visconti production. It's so good, so good, and I love Visconti's sound on here. I think Visconti wasn't a perfect producer, but man, when he was on, he was so pleasing to the ears. I think he's an underrated producer, and uh, yeah, I love the sounds on here. I have many, many, many favorite tracks. And it's funny because it's not an easy album. I mean, anything that opens up with a bunch of fast talking Japanese and then some screaming on It's No Game Part One. Like, like who would have said, "Hey, I think you should put that song as your opening track"? Well, Bowie didn't care. Bowie was going to make art rock. And he was going to make the best art rock he could, and most people are on board with this album. It's kind of surprising in some ways that it did as well as it did, maybe because of the Ashes to Ashes single, which is so infectious. But yeah, what are you going to do? I'm probably going to end up with the same two tracks as you, possibly. I don't know. But I'm going with Ashes to Ashes because it's undeniably a great pop song. And then I expect you to pick Teenage Wildlife. But yeah, you got Fripp on here, and you've got George Murray and Carlos Alomar and Dennis Davis, and you got so many great musicians on here, and it all gels together. And boy, you were talking about Sandinista hanging together really well as an album. I think Scary Monsters, the whole is even better than the sum is better than the parts. How's that saying go?
Yeah, the whole is better than the sum of the parts.
Yeah, and to be perfectly accurate, this album, and I will have it up here above when I do the text, Scary Monsters, and in parentheses, and Super Creeps, David Bowie.
Um, my favorite Bowie album, and at least when I'm in the mood for it to be my favorite. Uh, I mean, objectively, I might say Ziggy Stardust is Bowie's number one, but this is my personal favorite. And it is the end of a winning streak for Bowie as an art rocker. It's when, with his next album, and he did Let's Dance, he began to, go commercial, and he went into the 80s that a lot of people hate him for, but I don't, because Cindy and I love him. But Scary Monsters, my number one, and the same two tracks, Ashes to Ashes, Dust to Funky, We Know Major Tom's a Junkie, and Teenage Wildlife are my two favorites. But my third favorite, and if you're okay with it, is the title track, Scary Monsters and Super Creeps.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. That's actually not my, believe it or not, it's actually not my favorite track from the album. It's one of my, if I had to pick my two least favorite tracks, I would probably pick that one. Isn't that a shock?
Pick another one. It's my
Well,
favorite
no,
album.
I'm, well,
Anything you choose will be good.
I love the opening. It's No Game, part
It's no
one.
game. Part one, sure.
Are you sure?
Sure. Yeah, sure. That'll like pull the rug out from anyone who doesn't know the album and they hear it and with Bowie, silhouettes, shadows. Yeah.
So, so yeah, okay. Well, and maybe I'll put both on. Who knows? But
All right.
Scary Monster's still a great song, though. I mean, it's such a great album that there's not a bad track on it. I was just speaking comparatively to the other tracks. But then, I like I love the cover of Tom Verlaine's Kingdom Come. I just love that. And so just comparatively speaking, well, my number one, you probably guessed it because you've already mentioned it, but it's Peter Gabriel 3. And there you are with Steve Lillywhite again and Hugh Padgham or Padgham, however you say his name. This was quite a year for Lillywhite. He produced or co-produced at least three albums that we've mentioned so far. Yeah, this is a special album. I had not remembered that Atlantic, after one of the executives heard this album, suggested they drop Peter Gabriel from their roster. And some people, when they heard Lead a Normal Life, asked Peter if he was okay. And then that executive later went to work for Geffen Records, realized his mistake, and lured Gabriel over to Geffen Records. So I
That's a
guess
great.
admitting that you were wrong, but there were people who in the industry on the record label who, and it had to be distributed by Mercury in the States. Yeah, the record label was not on board with this. And you want to find interesting, Sometimes in those cases, when you look back, sometimes the artist is right, and sometimes the label is right. Not every artist makes the best decisions in their own interest, but Gabriel knew exactly what he was doing, and he got into this psychological territory. I don't remember as frightening. So is Intruder. I think I don't remember is even more frightening than Intruder, but then you got the creaking of the window in Intruder. Um, he went deep into psychology, but he did it as an artist. It wasn't autobiographical. I mean, Gabriel wasn't breaking into people's houses. He just got into the mindset of these characters, amnesia and burglary and these different things. But then, he closes the whole thing with Biko. If one of his most beloved concert songs about the South African Stephen Biko, who was killed in captivity. And um, I'm not sure of the timeline on that, if he was killed before the song or after the song, or what I've it's been too long and I've forgotten the details.
He, he was killed before
But
because the man is dead. The man is dead.
yeah, of course. And of course the lyric, you can put out a you can what's the line? You can put out a candle, but you can't put out a fire.
Watch the flames begin to catch. The wind will blow it higher.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like when we were talking about Fela, people in Nigeria have forgotten who was in government during that time, but they haven't forgotten Fela. And his music is still played at protests in Nigeria. And, so yeah, music and pop culture has a lasting effect. Um, it tends to last longer than any speech, generally speaking. And it's a great album. I know I'm going at a little bit of length, but it's my number one album. I don't know. You said you were talking about no cymbals. Yeah, it's sonically unique, sonically brilliant. All the playing on here, which, by the way, the chief drummer on here is not Phil Collins. It's Jerry Marotta.
Mhm.
He plays on more tracks than Collins, and he plays drums on one of my all-time favorite Warren Zevon songs. I love Jerry Marotta. He's got a good, strong. He hits the drums really hard. He's great. Larry Fast on here again, who, do you know Larry Fast played the bagpipes on Biko?
Did he?
Yeah, I just read that. And yeah, you have a lot of musicians on here, but they're stellar. So I'm going to go with Games Without Frontiers and Biko. So that's
Okay.
my number one.
So now we go with our runners up.
Yeah.
And for the runners up, I'm not going to take a lot of time talking about them, but I will give one recommended song for anyone who's interested. Okay.
Okay.
So it's all we're in my first list, and I had to cut them. One of them is Roxy Music, Flesh and Blood. Not the best Roxy Music album, but a fine one. And I recommend the song "Oh Yeah." There's a band playing on the radio. They're playing "Oh Yeah" on the radio. Then the Jam sound effects with the song "That's Entertainment." Um, I love what he says, and a kick in the balls. That's entertainment. Uh, Dire Straits, Making Movies. I've always loved one song from Making Movies in particular, Skate Away,
Mm.
about a girl who's a skater, and she just but I love the sound of the thing. Elvis Costello and the Attractions, Get Happy. Um, This is Elvis's Stax Volt album. Despite the fact that only one song was actually a cover, the whole thing feels like a Stax Volt album. And the song that I like the best because of the pun in the title as well as other things is High Fidelity. Faithfulness. Um, but high fidelity. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? And then finally, I really wanted to have this in my top 10 because it may have been the only Genesis album without Peter Gabriel. And it is probably my favorite Genesis album without Peter Gabriel, and that is Duke.
Mm.
And the song would be Behind the Lines, which Phil did separately on a solo album, but this Genesis version of it is best.
Wow, good list. Yeah, I can't argue with that. Good song selections. I guess I should put, I don't know. I don't think I'm prepared to pick a song from each album. Well, maybe. So my 11 and 12, I mentioned that I had 12 that was just so rock solid. And the two I had to cut, which really hurt, was Van Morrison's Common One. You know how much I love that album. And it was in my top 10, and I bumped it this morning. Yeah, for Joni Mitchell's Shadows and Light. So I traded those two at the 10, 11 position. If I had to pick a song that you didn't pick, it would be Satisfied. And the other one is XTC's Black Sea, which is really, quite honestly, a perfect album. I just don't see any flaws with it. Stephen Lillywhite's production is just great. Lillywhite, by the way, did U2's debut this year too, boy, which is a pretty good album. Lillywhite really had a banner year, didn't he, in 1980? But
Sure did.
Black Sea, I would pick. Well, man, it's really hard, but I might go with the opening, Respectable Street. But I also like I like living through another Cuba, and I like There Is No Language in Our Lungs, and there's so many great songs on here. But I'll go with Respectable Street. And then my 13, 14, 15 in no particular order. Two that you've mentioned. One is Joy Division Closer. And I don't have a song recommendation on that, but I wanted to make a comment that may bother you. I love this album, but I was reading the lyrics to Atrocity Exhibition, and it reminded me of the lyrics to Carnival 9.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm not going to I mean, that's also based on J.G. Ballard's novel, I believe.
Yeah, and oh, is it? Okay, so that
I
was
believe it
that
is.
was that was a good insight, huh?
Yeah.
Because musically they couldn't be farther apart. Um, but roll up, step inside. And then I heard Tom Waits singing Step Inside. Thought, no, that's not going to work. But, that song Step Inside by Tom Waits.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So what would you pick for a third track? 24
For a
Hour
third
Party
track
People?
from Closer.
Yeah.
I think for a minute.
Isolation or Colony?
Oh yeah, Isolation. Isolation. That was the single.
Okay, we'll put that on the honorable mentions playlist we've been working on. Okay, and you mentioned, and now I bet you're surprised this didn't make my top 10. Remain in Light. You know how I'm the big Talking Heads fan. I think the
Right.
first, I think the first five songs are perfect. But I tried to put in some objectivity. I think the album takes a little dip at the end on the last three tracks. I like them. Seen and Not Seen, Listening Wind, and The Overload. they're slower. They're not the funk jams, and but they sound a little bit like something more from a little bit more like David Byrne solo, maybe. So it just seems like the album takes a little bit of a turn at the end there. But man, Born Under Punches, Cross-Eyed and Painless, The Great Curve, Once in a Lifetime, Houses in Motion. Fantastic songs. If I had to pick one, I guess I would go with Cross-Eyed and Painless. Would you go with that one or The Great Curve?
I'd go with Cross-Eyed and Painless.
Yeah. So that's it. And then my last pick, not a perfect album because of one song, but I'm going to go with Queen's The Game. I haven't had any Queen on my list so far, and I love Queen. I'm a big Queen fan, but they keep missing my top tens and my honorable mentions. And I wanted to get them in here because this is such a great sounding album. The Game is a lot of fun. So, what's the weak track? Don't Try Suicide? Yeah, maybe a little maudlin, but the rest of the album's really good. And the bass playing by John Deacon. This opening, Dragon Attack, Another One Bites the Dust, Need Your Loving Tonight, Crazy Little Thing Called Love, Rocket, Prime Jive. First side of that album kills, slays, as the kids say. No, kids, there I go again. The young people say, that slays, or that's sick. Anyway, Queen the Game. And that's it. I'll wrap it up. You want to talk about
Okay.
who you've seen in concert?
Yeah, not too many of them actually, but some of them are really special. Um, I'm just gonna I'm gonna skip over the names and just go Van Morrison several times, Bruce Springsteen several times, Talking Heads once, Peter Gabriel two times, three times, um,
Three.
and David Bowie a number of times, Roxy Music once, Elvis Costello a couple times, and Genesis without Peter Gabriel at least once.
Okay. And my list is going to be a lot of people that I've seen. And I want to say just real quick, there's a relationship here. If you like albums by somebody, you tend to go see that person in concert, and then you see them in concert, it makes you like them even more. So it's not like I've seen everybody in the world, uh, but I've seen Gabriel once, Bowie four times, Costello three times, Pretenders three times, and that includes the original band. I saw them in '81 with James Honeyman Scott and Pete Farden. Didn't know those guys were going to die. So it was just another concert. But yeah, I love Pretenders in concert, one of my favorite live bands. Pete Townsend, well, yeah, I saw The Who post Keith Moon, and there was a 90-minute blackout during the show. This is Phoenix, Arizona. There was a dust storm. We had to wait 90 minutes it was right in the middle of my generation. He was stuttering, and the power went out. And Pete Townsend came out with a broom and started sweeping the stage. So I'll never forget that. X, I've seen three times, and I've seen John Doe once. Love X. Psychedelic Furs, I've seen two times. The Police and XTC, let's talk about those together. They were at the Arizona State Fair on a double bill. Man, am I glad I went to that show. It was the Zenyatta Mandala and Black Sea tours. And XTC, of course, quit touring after that tour because of Andy Partridge's stage fright. So I feel really, really lucky that I got to see the Police and XTC, but it was for fair admission. I probably paid $4 to see him. The one I'm jealous of I never saw Rush. I would have loved to have seen Rush. Never saw Joni Mitchell. Van Morrison twice. Queen I saw in '82 on the Hot Space tour. So yeah, that was great to see them. And then the Talking Heads 3 times. So I did pretty well on this list. Any last comments on 1980?
Looks like the 80s started out great. Let's see what happens in 1981.
It's going to be a different year. We already hinted at that just a little bit. Um, we used to talk about how it was a weak year. And then I changed my mind, and then I changed my mind again, and we'll see if I change my mind again. I go back and forth on 81. So it was definitely a unique year in the 80s, I feel. So yeah, we'll do that next week, I guess.
Yes, I think we can do that. I have movie night with Kaylee, but as long as we do it at our regular time, at the noon time, that will work.
Okay, great. And my biggest surprises on your list, probably that Joy Division was number two. Yeah, which is, yeah, no argument. No argument. Great album. Certainly special, isn't it?
It is.
All right. Well, I think we'll say goodbye to everybody and sign off. And if you want to hang on just a quick second, we'll just wrap it up off camera. So take care, everybody, as we say here in beautiful Mexico. Buen dia, bonita semana.
Bye bye.